Cool.
Hi, Maggie.
Hi, everybody. Hello, camel people. Thank you for having me.
Great you're here.
Yeah, we're so pleased to hear. I've got the comments running as well. So anybody that wants, like, we're going to cover a few topics today, but if you've got questions that you want to ask Margie, who she's going to do a short intro for you guys soon, then just tap them in the chat box or write them in the chat box. And yeah, we'll try and get to that for sure. We'll do a little short Q&A at the end.
Happy to help. Happy to help.
Awesome.
Excellent.
So can you start, Margie, just with a little bit about yourself and what it is you do? I think it's a dead giveaway, but...
Yeah. Well, it's clear that I'm not in IT or tech after that wonderful introduction. I am, I guess, a camel specialist. I've been working on camels now solely camels for about 5 years, but I've been a vet for just on 25 years. And for most of that, I was at the University of Queensland in their large animal or production animal specialist centre. So my main area is medicine and surgery of production animals. So that's anything you can eat, basically. So cattle, sheep, goats, we did alpacas, and I was sort of given the role, because I love alpacas, as the alpaca vet in that area. And then a few years ago, I was the vet for the Royal Show, and there was a gentleman there that said he was starting a camel dairy, and I didn't laugh. And apparently I was the first person that didn't laugh when he said that. And I said, no, it's a fantastic idea. It's tricky, and I think a lot of it, the success depends on location and management, but you know, they're fantastic animals. And ever since then, I just got given every camel case that came through the door, and that was fine because I love the damn things. And so now I've dedicated the last 5 years just to camel medicine and self-directed, getting myself as totally across the subject matter as I can. I tried to do like a specialty and become, you know, you can be an equine specialist, but the vet, I guess the Vet Surgeons Board, because there's no one who was higher than me in the camel game in Australia, they said I couldn't do it. So I went overseas and did a bit of work over in Dubai, and so yeah, I'm self-motivated, and all I do now is camels, and I try, and every day is just working on and reading as much about camel veterinary medicine as I can, to try and get, because the poor vets out there, when they're not taught anything about camelids, really, there's a couple of subjects, and camels are becoming more and more and more a part of people's lives, thankfully. And I really want to get out there, not just for the owners, but also for vets, just some tips that I've learnt on how to do it, because the vets, no fault of their own, aren't taught. So yeah, hopefully I'm here to help. I also am a big fan of saying I don't know something if I don't know it. And I think that a lot of vets come undone when they think that they can just work their way through, and it's better off saying I don't know and then looking it up. So but now I'm just a camel lady. Yesterday, I couldn't join you yesterday. I was preg testing about 80 camels yesterday, so my arm is very sore now, my right arm. Yeah, so it's pretty intense.
You do alternate arms though, don't you?
No, I don't. I'm only right-handed. It's not funny. You
need to do some side planks on the other arm then.
Oh, I totally do. I need to work on my game. But I've actually, next June, I've done a study with one of the unis down in Melbourne, and I'll have developed next year a blood test to determine pregnancy in camels that's specific for camels. Right. So basically all you have to do is any vet can take a blood sample, hopefully. Well, we'll talk about that. And with a blood test, and in about 12 minutes, you'll be able to determine, actually 6 minutes, you'll be able to determine whether your camel is pregnant or not. And no one has to die. No one gets hurt. and no one dies.
That's a
really
huge
good.
program.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so all of that's just off my own back, just trying to help people with camels. I've got no, I literally do it because I love camels. I've got 2 kids, so I'm trying to, as we all are, trying to fit our camel life with our home life as well.
Yeah,
So,
it's the hardest thing at times. Yeah.
Yeah, they come and help me, and they have to do a lot of nasty stuff. But that's part of the kid. Yes, totally. They've helped on so many things. They've done. Unfortunately, they've helped me with postmortems and sick things, and they just sit there going, "Why does this smell so much? Can't you have a normal job?" No, I can't. I can't have a normal job.
Well, see, for our kids, they don't know any different. They're like, they see a horse in the paddock, like, oh, there's a horse.
Oh my God, there's a horse. I know,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
which
good
is
for them,
good.
though.
I mean, that's the way we like it.
Totally. I don't want normal at all.
No.
So-
Oh, well, we're on the same page then.
This
You
is
bet. You bet.
it's very evident that you're passionate. I mean, obviously, just showing up here in the first place, I mean, it is awesome, and we're so grateful to have you on board with this idea, and also with the academy that we're going to tell people.
Yes, love it.
Yeah, like, and we're here the same reason as you, is we love camels, and we live and breathe them, and we educate people about camels. So we just don't have that scientific, technical side of stuff, which you do, and that's the part that we're missing in the whole, I suppose, scheme of things. So 100% appreciate you showing up.
Yeah, I want to get back to you. I'm sorry, my mind's starting to really cog in now. I've had some bacon,
Had a coffee.
Whoops, yes, and yeah, I've had some coffee and some Vegemite for the international guests. If you don't know what Vegemite is, it's an Australian cuisine.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So when you went to Dubai, now, of course, I mean, they've got some massive operations there with the dairies that are going on there. Now, the veterinary work that they were doing there, did you find that was, well, for a start, I mean, well, how did you find that? Because
How did I find the veterinary work? So I had the opportunity to go to Camelicious, which would probably be the world's biggest camel dairy, I'm pretty sure. And I actually met with, who I've met before at conferences, Dr. Peter Nagy and his wife, Dr. Uhouse, ex-wife, and not my fault. The
good to know.
Yeah, thank you. And they started the whole camel dairy industry. So they were sort of picked out by one of the sheikhs over there, and they started the whole thing. So it was just a fascinating insight. So I saw all of Camelicious, but I went over there for a reproductive centre and a camel hospital in Dubai to see what was going on. It's a different way, I think, because camels over there, there's such a cultural link. And it's such a cultural part of their being. Whereas my veterinary side of things, they're a production animal. I mean, obviously we've got an affinity, but I'd have to say the medicine was a little bit different. And I don't want to say, it was certainly different, and something that probably was around 20, 30 years ago. Australian veterinary medicine is incredible. We are right up there. Our techniques and our knowledge on disease and control, I really think is probably above what a lot of them are experiencing over there.
Yeah.
I went to the Camel Hospital, which was just so good in terms of it was the best set up hospital I've ever seen, and I've worked for universities. But they didn't know a lot of what to do, and they were doing medicine that was not something that I would be comfortable with. Right. They were amputating legs of camels, which is just like not an option. But again, there's that cultural thing that we don't see our worth as a human in our worth in the camel. So I can understand there was a bit of a discourse there, but our medicine is, I would say, up here.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I honestly believe that, and I've talked to a lot of colleagues. I mean, the trouble is though, in Australia, because camels, because Camels isn't mainstream, you need to find someone that's willing to go the extra mile and do something different, because they are a completely different animal from cattle, from horses. They're different. They're not a big cow. Yeah. They're not a big sheep, and they're not a little horse. They're a camel.
You're talking about the physiology of the animal.
Yeah, and the medicine and what we're using with them. You cannot think of them just as a big sheep or a big goat. You have to think of them as a completely different species, which they are. I saw your nutrition talk, Tara, and it was spot on. Like they're a pseudo ruminant. They've got 3 stomachs. All the medications we use, everything has to be tailored to them. That's why it's oh, my phone is beeping. That's why it's difficult to get advice. It's difficult to get good advice, because you go to a feed store and they're doing their best.
Yeah.
You go to the vet and they're doing what they think is right, and they may not have time to talk to one, camel, and they're scared. People are intimidated and they're scared of not knowing as well. No one wants to go to a call out and get there and go, I have no idea what is wrong with this animal. Oh my God.
And that's where the problems arise.
And that's where the problem arises.
There's another problem too, that when we were training over in the States, the clients that we had, the people that we were in contact with, they said it's really difficult to get a vet out because they don't know the animal. And there's only a couple of vets that we know of in the States that are willing to investigate and actually have some camel experience, or quite a lot in one particular person's case. But they don't know how to handle the animal. And of course, being a different sort of animal,
the drugs are different. The drugs are different.
That's right. That's
Which
exactly
makes it dangerous, doesn't it? And we'll get into that for sure. But excuse me. So I want to jump into the question about why camels, we've talked about, especially in lesson 1 and stuff, how different camels are. And what annoys me the most is that people they get a pet camel and they treat it like every other animal that they've had. And it is dangerous in respect to, putting strain on their vital organs and everything like that. And just ultimately their health. But I want you to explain to everybody why a camel needs so much salt in their diet, because that is the number one thing we see new camel owners not doing, is feeding camels salt.
That's really interesting. It's a great question. And you get a camel and you now have to become a bit of an expert in camels yourself, because it's not like sticking a horse in a paddock, and it's not like sticking a couple of goats in a paddock. In terms of the salt, the way I like to think about camels is that they are a perfect adaptation. They're perfectly adapted for their semi-arid, arid environment. The funny, how people used to think that water was stored in the hump and all of that, and we know that to be not true, obviously. The interesting thing about camels is it's the way they handle dehydration. So they don't so the idea of they need salt is because the whole physiological way that they work in terms of their kidneys and this hormone called aldosterone, and the way that the kidney absorbs water or excretes water, is reliant on sodium chloride, is salt. And all the things that go on in your kidneys are really salt related, the way that it maintains your body's hydration level. So the reason why camels need more salt is that they are adapted to an environment that is really low in water. So they need salt to hold on to the water. If you don't provide them with that salt, it's like the first cog in the next, all the bits of the engine after that aren't going to work. So I really liked what you said about the salt licks. They can become addictive to camels, and they don't actually get the right amount of salt that they need. I don't know what your stats were, but I've got it's about 150 grams of salt per day per camel. And the hard blocks aren't as good as crushing them up and having them in the feed. They can get addicted to the salt. But I think anyone can get addicted to salt in a way. But the reason they need salt is that they're adapted to retain water. This is fascinating with camels. Whatever system you're looking at, whether it's their digestive system or their reproductive system, the whole thing is designed to retain water from their rumen. They've got 3 stomachs. The first one is it's actually called C1. It's not technically called a rumen. In a cow, that rumen is just a big muscular ball, basically just churning up and mechanically breaking down the straw. With camels, it's not. They've got pockets that produce mucus, so to help break down their really thick, fibrous-y, sticky diet. Now that requires extra water to produce that mucus, and so they've got to get that from somewhere. So their whole modus operandi is storing water. Help me store water. And you need salt for water retention. It's probably the best way to describe it. So if you're denying them of salt, you're setting all their kidneys out of whack, and therefore every other organ. I'll give you a quick, interesting thing. Camels' red blood cells are a different shape.
Yep.
Yes.
That's why when you go, if you've got a vet that's not used to camels and they take a blood sample and then they come back and go, oh, we can't run this in our machine at work, it's because they're a different shape and the machine won't recognize it. The reason they're a different shape is so cool. Mm. They're an elliptical shape, right? So if you're dehydrated, your blood cells get really sticky. And so if you've got round blood cells, they've got an area that they can get really sticky and they clump. Now, if you've got clumped red blood cells,
the blood clot,
you're basically setting yourself up for a stroke.
Yeah.
Camels' red blood cells are elliptical and they can slide over each other a whole lot better. So that's why they can handle dehydration a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So they're freaking amazing.
And also what I believe that those blood cells are like, when they do go ahead and consume water, I mean, you know, we're talking, over 100 litres, say, for example, that, of course, that gets absorbed inside the blood. And, you know, as you said, the hump he hasn't got. So that those blood cells must change some shape somewhat.
Correct. So they can go from this elliptical shape. It actually allows them to have a much bigger volume, to carry a much bigger volume of fluid, extracellular fluid. It's called intracellular fluid. And because of the shape of the red blood cells, they hold more intracellular fluid. And that means that if you're a camel and you're out in the middle of nowhere and you've got no water, you can handle it, not forever, but you can handle it a bit longer than something else. So every single thing about a camel is adapted to make the most of its environment. And that environment is arid, semi-arid. And I think you'll find, I'm sure with a lot of your clients, a lot of the problems come when we put them in a different environment, the environment where we're in, which isn't semi-arid. You've got to adapt what you do to help that camel adapt to our environment.
Thank you.
And I love that you touched on that the other day. We have to help the camel adapt to what we're making them do, basically. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, like, on exactly that point, you know, I'm in a process of revegetating the paddocks of our property.
Perfect.
Going into more eucaceous and the dry desert plants, you know, that are actually really good for climate change, because they're in actual fact, well, not only we take carbon, but also these plants are all drought tolerant.
Correct.
But they're the plants that the camels eat out in the Australian arid zone anyway, and that's where I figured that instead of eating grass or the different weeds that we've got around the place, that got to be better for the gut flora for a start, and just for their general health with the vitamins.
100%. So I won't bore you with it, but I could talk about camels' gut flora for days. A couple of interesting things that I think will.
Oh, we're frozen again. We just started to get excited about the gut.
Will help certainly your clients, I know, right, is the fact that I've done lots of research on what bacteria they have in their gut and are they different from cows. And they are. And the most interesting thing is that camels have more what's called fiber degrading bacteria in their gut than cows. Cows have more short chain carbohydrate bacteria. And that's because cows are grazers and camels browse. So browse means you're going to eat sticks and twigs, and you're not going to desperately want a thorny bush, but you will be able to eat it because that fiber degrading bacteria works better on larger chain carbohydrates. So a lot of the times we have problems with camels is when we're giving them a diet that's not, that their gut isn't suited to. And a lot of that is your grasses and your hays, and while they're good, they need the roughage and they need the fibre and they need Australian native plants. Things like saltbush, acacia, all of that stuff, mulga, fantastic. Not every day, it's the variety that they thrive on.
That's exactly right,
And in terms of carbon, this can be for everybody's environmental side. There is a study that says camels produce a third less methane than a cow per day.
Fantastic.
So let's get on the camel train. It's a study that came out in 2018, so it's really recent. So in terms of the methane emissions, they're actually an environmentally friendly alternative.
Look, Maggie, I am getting more and more
excited.
I'm getting more excited talking with you. I distinctly remember during the Millennium Drought, the 2008, it was around about 2008, when Sydney was covered with a dust storm. And inside the newspaper, it had, because of the feral camel problem that we have in Australia, they're kicking up all the dust.
Oh, really?
And they're releasing that much methane that, they're creating global warming.
No, incorrect.
That was in the paper. That was in the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah, no, it has nothing to do with all the cattle out there.
Or the industry in China, like what?
Nothing at all. No, that's right. I mean, forget about the 100 million cows that we've got in Australia. Forget about the, whatever. It was the 1 million camels way out in the sticks, which incidentally, having walked through that country, the lands, they still had grasses up, way high. But as soon as you got into the station country, in that drought period, there was nothing left, unfortunately, and it was a very situation.
They decimated, and this is the beauty about, if you manage camels well with their nutrition, they will give back. I've got a theory with animals. If you let them express their camelness, they will return to you whatever you need, whether that's production, whether that's training, whether that's meat. But you have to let them. I know it sounds woo-woo, but you've got to let them express their supplements if they need supplementation, looking at where they are in their environment and going, okay, this isn't really where they're made to be. How can I make it better for them? And I think with that, and that's most of the stuff that I tell clients, is we've really got to watch where we're putting these camels and how we're managing them. And it might be that, I mean, I'd love pet camels where I am, but it would be, I don't have the right area. I'm not in the right area. I'm right on the East Coast. I'm in Brisbane. I don't have enough land, so I can't. So I think some people just need to really tailor. You've really got to watch what the camel needs and then see how you can give that. But that's probably enough on that, I guess. Well, I don't want to bore anybody.
But, that's a part of the reason why, like here we are in East Gippsland of all places. I mean, I think there's a couple of people that might have camels here in East Gippsland, but that's it, and there's a very good reason for that. And I can see that not only for just the nutrition, changing their diet by growing these trees and shrubs.
Perfect. Yeah.
But also it's good for the parasites as well with the camels.
Well, that's the next thing I want to get into. So we've talked a bit about nutrition, the salt, and like the cogs in the wheel, I suppose you could say. But ultimately, if something's out of balance, they're going to be more susceptible to parasites. So what do you want to say about parasites? I'll let you run wild with this because, there's so many directions we could go. Topic. But what's your thoughts on parasites in camels?
Okay, so parasites in camels, they do seem to be affected by more of them, but I think that's because we put them in areas and we feed them in ways that they're not used to being fed. As I said, they're browsers. They like eating up high. They prefer to eat up. If you keep feeding your camels on the ground, you're just repeating that cycle over and over and over and over and over again. Now, I'm not saying you can't feed them on the ground. I'm a realist, right? You do have to do that. But if you can, it's about managing the cycle. So that's picking up the poo, at least scraping it away, to not allow them to do that. But the parasites, I think the biggest thing is you can really, as an owner, be in charge of the parasite problem. There is one of the things we are taught that if you are on the east coast of Australia, as a vet, if you get a call out to a camel, it's probably a 90% chance that it's going to be a parasite problem. Yes. And that's just the truth. Yes. Now, no one likes to hear that because it's like being told your dog has fleas. It makes you feel bad. You're like, oh God, not my dog.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't mean the vet thinks you're bad. If you've got parasites, it's part of the course. So let's manage it and let's work out how. So everybody wants the quick fix, and I'm going to talk about, I don't know much about, and I don't really, I'm just not going to touch on any organic style of parasite control because that's not my area.
Yeah, sure.
What I want to say is when you know better, you do better. If you know what your camel's parasite load is, you can tailor a program specifically for your farm. Yeah. So how do you work out what the load is? Well, it's fecal egg counting.
Yep.
Now, any vet will be able to do it. Trust me, we would prefer to do a camel fecal egg count than a cat because that's disgusting. Yeah. So camel poo is a lot better. So if someone brings in like a packet of camel poo, I'm happy girl.
Yeah.
But if they say they want a fecal egg count on their cat sample, I'm out.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is get familiar with your vet. Now that vet doesn't have to know anything about camels. All they need to do is do the fecal egg count, or you can learn to do it yourself. There's two types. One is called the McMaster method, and that's really common. But there's a better one for camels.
Yes.
And it's called the modified Wisconsin egg count method. Oh, and it sounds fancy, but it basically uses sugar instead of the fecal count solution, which is salt. So it's the modified Wisconsin or the stopped Wisconsin fecal test.
So see, in the States they call it a modified stool test. I don't know.
That might be the modified Wisconsin. It depends.
So
your vet's probably not going to know that because it's a really camel specific thing.
Yes.
Even a McMaster gives you a little window. Now, fecal egg counts don't give you, they're not the be all and end all. What they do is they give you a snapshot in time. It's like a little Instamax camera picture.
Yeah.
Like a Polaroid of what's going on in that animal that day.
Yeah.
So even though you might have had a really bad worm burden ages ago, and this day it's not too bad, but your camel still looks horrible. Yeah. All that fecal egg count is, it tells you that day. Now it's counting the eggs produced by the adults in the intestine. So the adults are stuck in the intestine, whichever part that may be.
Yeah.
So you've got your fecal egg count. So what that's telling you is, and say you've got 1,000 eggs and there's different types of eggs, and that's where your vet will be able to determine. Or do you know what? If you've got a lot of camels, do a Google search for a couple of different options. If people want to contact me, I can give them the options to look for. What I have done at a lot of clients' farms is I've got photos of the worm eggs to look for, and then you have that up in the lab room. It's really easy. You need a microscope. You can get that stuff on eBay or Gumtree.
I actually have I have a whole list of all the equipment that everyone needs if they want to do their own tests.
Oh, fantastic. It is the best tool ever. It's a tool. It won't cure your problem, but when you know initially. So then you do what's called a fecal egg count reduction test. So what that means is it's really easy. You do your test, you give them a worm treatment, and then in 14 days' time, you do another test.
Yeah.
And then you see what the reduction in the egg count is.
Sure.
And that'll work out whether not the camels, it will tell you whether the worms are resistant
Yes.
to the medication. It's not the camel that's resistant, it's the worm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, in terms of that,
It's a big important point.
That's a really important point, because
yeah,
some people say, like, well, how often do you worm your camels? And we're like, whoa.
yes.
You need to know if your camel has any parasites. Because
Correct.
if you're just worming willy-nilly, like every 6 months, 3 months or whatever, you're building up resistance, likely building up resistance with all these parasites, which is the problem. And I think that's where we get our problems with parasites from. I mean, you know this as a vet, but in particular camels, and they are very incredibly sensitive to parasites in our environments. So getting that test is so important. And in Australia, it's like, I know with our vet, it's probably about $100 per camel, so it's fairly expensive.
Really?
Well, he has to send it away because they don't have the equipment. But you know, it costs about under $200 to buy all the equipment, and then you can do it yourself. So
100%. And so with the vet sending it away, I get that. So the gold standard would be what's called a larval culture. So what that is you take a poo sample, you send that in give it to the vet, and they'll know what to do if you ask for it, and you just ask nicely. No one wants their ego bruised, but so it's a larval culture. So what that's doing is that a lot of eggs can look the same. So there's a group of parasites called strongyles, and all their eggs kind of look the same in a fecal float. But what you might want to find out, certainly if you've never done it before, is send that poo sample away with that larval culture. They DNA identify, they grow the egg out, they find the larva, they DNA identify exactly what parasite that is. They can also identify exactly what it's resistant to or what it's sensitive to. Now that's a couple of $100 worth every cent.
Absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned, if you're as a starting point. If you've never done it before, absolutely get that done. You find out what's on your farm. And I mentioned things like strongyles. So they're a particular type of egg that you find in your fecal egg count. Those strongyles can be into homuncus, which is Barber's pole worm, which everyone's probably heard of. And the other one is strongyloides. They do different things. Barber's pole will cause your animal to become anemic, which is probably the most common problem I see, and a thing called hypoproteinemic, in other words, low in protein.
Yes.
Remember how we talked about how much of a balance and how particularly adapted these animals are to living in marginal country? If you do anything to upset that balance, they get sick really quickly.
Yes.
That is why they're more sensitive to worms, because if you've got worms sucking out the protein, then that perfect balance that the camel works on just gets out of whack. That's why your camel can look great one week and the next week look completely awful, have lost 50 kilos, looks terrible. And once they're down to that weight loss point, it's really hard to get them back up. It's hard to put weight on a camel.
Yeah, amen to that.
It really, really is hard. So my recommendation is know what you're dealing with. Don't just throw out a wormer, throw out this just to hope. Get a fecal, either a larval culture or at least a fecal egg count, and work it out. There's a study going around, if anyone's out there that's got more than 12 camels, get in contact with Tara or myself, because you can be part of a really, really good study through Melbourne Uni, and they will do all that testing for you. And they will give you an on-farm plan for what you need to do for your worms. It doesn't cost anything. All they're collecting is data for, a nerdy PhD. That's fine. So I would recommend that. Can I talk about different types of drenches?
Yes.
Please. 3 different types of worming. 1, oral.
Yes.
2, pour on.
Yeah.
3, injectable.
Yeah.
Each one, they are not created equally.
Yes.
Pour-ons. A lot of people talk to me about pour-ons. the cattle pour-ons, or the ones that we're used to, aren't going to be as effective as they are on cattle.
Right.
Why?
Thank you so much for tuning into this short little snippet of our Camel Husbandry and Vet Care short course that we've recently been running. That's all we can share with you today, but if you would like to listen to the full episode and live conversation with Camel Vet Margie Bale, you can head over to our website, camelconnection.com/camel care to get access to this free short course. There are 4 lessons with 1 Q&A live call answering all your camel husbandry and vet care questions. It is only for a limited time, so jump on it while you can. In the lessons, we covered things like camel nutrition and camel feeding plans and why their hump size does matter. And we covered treating common problems such as scours, skin issues and weight gain or obesity. We also covered our camel first aid kit. We unpacked our entire camel first aid kit so you guys can take notes and add things to your camel first aid kit. And then lesson 4, we talked with Camel Vet Margie, which was this talk you've just listened to. There is a lot more that we covered. There was about an hour-long conversation. So don't forget to get access to this for free in full. All these lessons, you can head over to camelconnection.com/camel care. We would love to have you there. We've received such wonderful feedback from everybody, just saying how much value they've got from these lessons, and we're so grateful that we can deliver this to you in this way. So thank you so much for tuning into another episode on our Camel Connection podcast, and we'll see you on the other side.